Okay, good morning, everybody. You're all very welcome to our panel discussion this morning. This is the second in the series of 10. It's been put together by Fight2Flight theatre company, and Smock Alley are very kindly hosting this. So I want to thank Lucy Ryan for her support. Also that the initiative has been supported by the Arts Council with additional support from the Irish Theatre Institute through Accelerate, which is funded by Rethink Ireland. The series was piloted in August, so this is the second in the series. The first discussion was a two-part discussion. The first panel was where older actors taught, and the second panel was a group of younger actors, and the theme of that was coping with unemployment. So the discussion today is about, the theme is habit is a great deadener, which is a quote from Samuel Beckett. And so on the panel today we have two directors who will be sharing with us their experience of working in the rehearsal room, and around that theme as it relates to working with actors. It says actors can create difficulties for directors in rehearsal rooms by not doing what they're told. No. So this morning I'm very happy to introduce John O'Hare, who's joining us today, and Conor Hanratty. And so without further ado, I didn't introduce myself. My name is David Herlihy, and I'm an actor. And it's great to have you all here this morning. Obviously, again, we're in difficult, challenging times, so thank you for coming and expressing an interest.
You can tell by my accent that I'm from Australia. Most of my career has been in Australia as a director and as an actor too, and a producer. I have a theatre company in Sydney, Australia, Opunksky's theatre company, with my co-founder and co-director is Lisa Stafford, who was the artistic director of the Druid Theatre Company when Gary Hines was here in Dublin. So you may know Lisa Stafford and the Stafford family from Galway. So we have a company in Sydney. My career stretches over 30-odd years. I trained at East 15 in London, and then continued my training at the West Australian Academy of Performing Arts. I've run acting schools in Sydney and Brisbane and Melbourne in Australia, and directed plays, many plays and many actors. I directed a play here in Kilkenny Castle. Getting to the subject, without telling anybody how to suck eggs, there are the cliches, and the cliches are very obvious for working with actors. The first one, obviously, is tardiness, as the Americans call it, and we do in Australia. Good one for you guys up there. It's a funny little thing. Strasbourg said, if you can't be on time, be early. And it's such an important little detail in all of our careers, and that goes for directors too. I'll switch it around, because the actors with the right habits are the ones that I admire and recast and work with continually. You sometimes work with actors that are difficult, for many different reasons, and they're often very, very talented. And there are often many, many different reasons as to why they might be difficult, and part of a director's job is to work that out, psychological reasons and, emotional reasons and personal issues may be going on at a particular time. But, we talk about nepotism or working with the same people over and over again, and there's a reason why we do that. It's because they're great to work with. Because no one wants to spend, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 3 months of your life working with someone who is really, really difficult to work with. And that's just sort of a general across-the-board feeling. It's an energetic thing that I find. I go into a rehearsal and I muster myself every time, every day. I never feel like I'm worthy. I think, who am I to be going in to tell these actors what to do? They're the people with the talent. I'm just giving feedback. So every day, rehearsals, before rehearsals, I'm psyching myself in to go into rehearsals to be worthy of the actors that I'm working with. And it's a very difficult thing, but it's about a positive energy. And I go in being positive, and that's what engenders an ensemble. As far as I'm concerned, it's the positive connection that you have with each other as a group of people. And times are tough, and there's nothing like and nothing better than being in the rehearsal room with actors. I mean, I work here at the Gaiety School, and there's a few of my students upstairs there. I can see them now. And there's nothing better than being in a room with actors, particularly during these times. It's the most exciting place to be. It's the only place I want to be. I prefer to be in rehearsals working on a project with a group of great actors that want to be there, more than the actual production itself, more than opening night. I mean, once opening night's happened and you go in and give your notes, a couple of times a week, sitting in the house seats, it's sort of taking care of itself in many ways, but it's the creative process, the working things out together. So it's the positive thing that I look for is enthusiasm, I'm probably going to cover a lot of territory here before I hand it over, but the other thing is note-taking. It's a real pet thing with me. Be a good note-taker. It's as simple as that. If I give a note, I don't want to debate about it. I don't want it to go on for hours. I don't want it to become about you. We can talk about it later. But when I give a note, I'm giving a note to an ensemble. So, we do a run. We run a couple of scenes, and we're going to, give notes on those scenes that we've run this morning. So I'm giving notes, and I've got a little shorthand, So, it's the actor's responsibility to sort of key into that and then work the note. Don't come back to rehearsal, to the next rehearsal, and we're working on that scene, and you haven't worked the note. There's nothing worse than that. And I'll give you an example of a good example of that. I work with a well-known Australian actor, fantastic Australian actor. You may or may not know him. His name's Hugo Weaving, and I did the premiere of Arcadia with Tom Stoppard. He came over and worked with us, and Hugo was in that. So we'd work a scene. We'd work scenes A and B in the morning, and then C and D in the afternoon. And after rehearsal, Hugo would come up after a note session, and he'd say, "John, can we just work back for half an hour, 15 minutes, half an hour, and just go through those notes on the floor, active analysis, get up on the floor and work the notes." So I say, "Yeah, sure, no problem," and you work the notes. Of course, you end up being there for 2 hours with Hugo, and that was the way he was. But the other thing that he did, going back to tardiness and lateness, we would get to rehearsal, my stage manager and I and the team would get to rehearsal more than half an hour early every day. Who was there working the notes before we even got there? Hugo Weaving. Hugo Weaving was there on stage working the notes that we'd worked the night before, ready for rehearsal that day. And it's a note or a lesson that I share with students, because I say to my students, why is Kate Blanchett Kate Blanchett? And I've directed her too. And why is Hugo Weaving Hugo Weaving? That's why. Because if you work it out, the amount of time that Hugo has rehearsed on the scenes compared to everybody who just turns up and, does their job and does a good job, and they're just as talented as Hugo. He's no more talented. And Kate, they have just the same kind of acting issues and problems and blocks and fears and insecurities as anybody else. But they overcome those fears and insecurities because they end up with a week and a half more rehearsal time on their active analysis on the stage. It's just a clever little thing that he does. And Kate does exactly the same. They put in more time. And they put in more time with energy and with positivity. And I know that sounds like suck eggs, and it is an obvious cliche, but I'm here to tell you it's absolute gospel truth. And the notes. Just take the note, work the note, and we can have a discussion about it, a couple of lines maybe, but everybody's tired, everybody wants to go home, and there's nothing worse for the other actors and the breaking down of the ensemble spirit if the note session becomes about you and your character. We want to be able to give notes to everybody and not, give piecemeal notes at the end of the day because the technical crew are saying we've got to have a 10-hour turnaround. Anyway, I'll hand that over to you now, Conor, just as an introduction. Yeah.
Thanks, John. It's absolutely fascinating. Appreciate that.
I just want to hear more from you.
Pardon?
I just want to hear more from you.
Conor.
My name is Conor Hanratty. I am a director as well. And since I've had 18 months off, of course, I've arrived this morning wildly over-prepared. So I've about 8 minutes here, none of which is what you were talking about, which is fantastic. But I was sort of thinking about habit versus rehearsal and what those two are. So anyway, we all have habits, whether they're the jokes or the stories we tell or the things we like to do or even the superstitions that we accrue over our lives in the theatre. And I don't know if they're good or bad per se. The big thing about habits is that they are performed almost subconsciously. They're like a fixed way of thinking or of behaving that we repeat. In thinking about this provocation that we were given, I don't know if you guys heard it as well, that habit is the great deadener, which is a quote from Beckett that somebody smarter than me can probably tell us where it's from. Peter will remind us. It's sort of been striking me that there's a paradox to the way that we work in a rehearsal room. We want to create a space that is free and open to allow invention and magic and brilliance. And then we reach a point, not necessarily defined, at which we're trying to turn that energy into a repeatable, reliable agreement or product, God forbid, that will be performed on stage at every show. A habit, as every motivational, inspirational influencer on Instagram will tell you, can be formed in as little as 3 to 4 weeks. 3 to 4 weeks of repeating a new learned behaviour, which sounds a little bit like rehearsal, doesn't it? Because I want you to. We all have these little things that we do. I'm doing one of them now. Sometimes they can become a trademark and even become the thing for which we get hired. There can be comfort and a familiarity to that. But of course, it can get much more exciting if you see an actor known for one thing or for their habits turn that completely on its head. Think of when Neil Tobin was in The Field, or more recently, I suppose, Nathan Lane in Angels in America, doing something that they're completely not known for, but then shockingly, brilliantly doing it. I also work a little bit, well, a lot now, in opera, where the singers are supposed to show up on the first day of rehearsal with all of their music fully learned by heart. This is not a bad idea, since very often opera is performed in a different language, and so there's a lot of that work that you want to have done before you start. Somehow, when there isn't music accompanying it that we have to learn, we get nervous of knowing things in advance. Indeed, we even worry that actors will get into a particular habit of saying the lines. The biggest example of this I can give you is I worked on, but I did not direct, a production of Hamlet, in which the Claudius arrived on day one with his Claudius learned off in his head, and there was no changing a syllable of it. This did not lead to a very enjoyable process, since he couldn't get out of his own way and respond to everyone else in the room. Indeed, he was obnoxious enough to suggest that he couldn't cope with any cuts as we moved along either. He sticks in my head as the worst kind of an excuse for habit and rote learning and being over-prepared, because weirdly his preparation left him utterly unable to do the job. It didn't give him any freedom to think or respond, and made most of us in the room hate him. He wanted to do his Claudius his way, and that was all we got. From day one to opening to the end of the run, it did not change. And he got no reviews. By contrast, one of the two actors playing Hamlet, it was a whole double cast production. The only person who was not double cast was Claudius. It was a total nightmare. But one of the Hamlets really wanted to speak his speeches like nobody had ever done them before. In particular, he had happened upon the reading as, I'm sure you know that soliloquy, but in the middle of it he wanted to say, "'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished to die." This is not what's on the page. On any of the pages, and there are plenty of them to choose from. But he was determined. This 21-year-old was convinced that Hamlet had a death wish, and this was the line that was the proof. And fair play to him, he went off and he watched a heap of other performances, like everyone he could find on the internet, on video, everything. He really, really tried. And he came back to me utterly heartbroken because he couldn't find anybody who performed it the way he had decided needed to be done. Mainly because nobody would do it that way. But he was passionately determined because he didn't want it to seem stale or ordinary. I was like the assistant director and the stage manager and the dramaturg and the editor and the general dog's body and BITCH of that production. But I did spend some time with him alone, and I said, why don't you just read what's there and observe, just to try. And I wasn't being patronizing. He had literally done everything else except try it the other way. Just once. And observe that full stop that comes after wished. It's a consummation devoutly to be wished. Because after he starts saying to die, there's a very long sentence. And he did a brilliant job. It was electric. And sheepishly, he told me that he was able to breathe better for the rest of that line. And the whole subsequent very long sentence made much more sense to him all of a sudden. And best of all, he felt that being able to breathe with it, he could think about it while he was performing it. I'm not trying to say this like I'm some sort of miracle worker, like that lady teaching Helen Keller how to communicate. But he paid attention and he tried again, and he got out of his own way, and that was the, we often say things like, you have to kill your darlings, because, as a director, certainly I come into a room and I have this little idea of what it's going to be. And of course the show will end up being much bigger, but it might not represent what was there. We let that go. And he did. And his performance was one of the better elements of that Hamlet. Both of these examples are very extreme. Somebody who absolutely can't change and somebody who will try anything to get to where he thinks he want to go. It's ironic that they both showed up within the same unforgettable production. But they stick with me. Do we worry about getting into a habit because learning the lines too well in advance is going to stick? Is this somehow going to limit our capacity for freshness or for surprises in the room? This last year, nearly 2 years, has certainly shown us just how much time we can spend at home, alone, thinking about what we will do rather than actually getting to do it. I completely mirror what you said about being in a rehearsal room. There's nowhere better. And if we've missed anything in the last 2 years, it's other people's ideas. So, for example, I showed up this morning with a speech written for a conversation. Likewise, I did a King Lear project fairly recently, and I've never been more prepared for anything that I've ever done in my life. And yet, as soon as I started rehearsal, all of that didn't really matter so much, because what's more important was the other people in the room. They were also more interesting. And the fun began in the horse trading and compromising and sharing between all the thinking that they had done before we started as well. That poor Claudius, I'm not pointing at you, sorry. That poor Claudius was a lost cause, not because he learned everything in advance, but because he genuinely couldn't cope with any other ideas that were not his own. I haven't thought about him very much in the last years, although I think about Hamlet occasionally. But certainly, if habit is to be considered a deadener, this guy is the poster boy. The attempt to repeat something so doggedly that it becomes an unthinking pattern or behaviour, utterly secure and immune to change, or progress, or distraction, or surprise. He was that. And of course, when we think of habits, the word most likely to come before habit is bad. In a recent rehearsal room, a wisecrack Italian pianist told a moaning soprano that the French word for rehearsal is repetition, and that yes, she had to do it again, because that's what rehearsal means. I thought this was kind of eye-opening. As she trudged through her aria again, I went off and I looked up the etymology of rehearsal rather than repetition, just because doubtless some Italian might ask me what it meant. Aside from the shared root of the word, going back to the Middle Ages, from hearse, which is rather dead, and a distant relation to the word harrow and harrowing, the sense of rehearsal is to go over again, to rake over, to turn over. It's far more active than just repetition. It's almost like panning for gold. What really excites me is the spirit of concentration, of focused attention, when a whole company is united in the challenge of a piece together. I first encountered it when I got to be Lynn Parker's assistant on a production back when I was a seed, and really, she's the best at it of all of them. I think my favourite example of it is a story told of the dog that would sit in the rehearsal studio of the Moscow Art Theatre. I'm sure Stanislavski, another bad habit, would probably tell the story better, but it went something that the dog was extremely well behaved in the room and would sit all the way through the morning rehearsal. And it knew, as soon as the air in the room changed, that it was time to go for a walk, because everybody's behaviour changed. The footfalls, of the way that people walked around the room, the way they spoke to each other, all of it was different, and the dog could sense when people were rehearsing and when people were just being. And obviously when they were being, they might take him for a walk. And that is the kind of a difference that we should be aiming for when we're a company together as a rehearsal. I think there must be a sweet spot somewhere in between rote learning that locks you into a particular delivery, and then there's the zeal, of course, to burn it all down and create something new every night. As an audience member, I absolutely love it when things go wrong and you can see actors being brilliant and improvising and helping each other and fixing things. As a director, this is my nightmare. Of course, we all want to be in the room on that special night when Maria Callas sings the highest note of her career and she can never sing that well again, or when Daniel Day-Lewis sees the ghost of his father when he's playing Hamlet. You know, these kind of crazy things that happen just as a once-off. But, thrilling as they may be, my brain does immediately also go to all of the other actors who are just trying to do their job that they rehearsed together. And then there's this one person doing that. And it's a balance. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know whether it's better to be fully just secure and rehearsed and not alive anymore, or to be open to what's in the room, because it's always different. Every night is different. Every audience is different. You know, whether it's Tuesday or Wednesday, something will happen and it's never going to be quite the same. And I have to live with that. But what about just telling the story? Working as a team to construct a narrative and then deliver it superbly. To see the whole company of actors who have rehearsed and developed a piece and built a production together with a room to respond to the live, but a framework to fall back on and repeat every night. That's what's really exciting. It's new every night, the circumstances are just different enough, and it's repeated, it's retold, and it's redone. But if it's good, and it's active, and it's alive, and it's conscious, I don't think it has become a habit, which hopefully will lead to a chat.
Yes, very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Conor. That was a fascinating insight. One of the things that struck me there when you said about the actor who was playing Claudius, immediately I thought, there was a friend of mine a few years ago who was working with this, who's regarded as one of the greatest directors in the world. Not my words, but this is a reputation, Ivo van Hove. And he was doing a production in the West End. It was an adaptation of a film script, which was originally a movie all about Eve. And this friend of mine who was in it, she was a fabulous actor, you know, sort of been there, done a huge amount of theatre over the years and a huge amount of film and TV. But anyway, I met him before Christmas and he said, or I was talking to his wife rather before I met him, and she said, he's up the walls. And I said, Reeve, why? What's why? He says, well, he's starting to work with Ivo van Hove after Christmas and he has to be off book before rehearsals. And I immediately started getting a kind of a panic attack by proxy, thinking to myself, oh my God, I can't imagine how awfully sort of stressful that would be. And I think for him it was like he realised, or he said to himself, look, this guy's got a great reputation. He's you know, his reputation sort of goes before him. Therefore, I will go against what my initial instinct, which is this is completely counter to the way I want to work, or how I'm used to working. But I will do what I've been asked to do, and I will turn up on rehearsals off book, because that's the kind of prerequisite. That's part of the contract. That's what I've been told. In other words, if you show up in rehearsals the first day and you're not off book, it's not going to work out. You know what I mean? And maybe you'll be fired. Who knows? I don't know how that would have worked. But anyhow, I suppose in that context, so to think that I would see that as an extreme. Although I've heard as well, you know, somebody was telling me, it might have been Peter, I'm not sure, but that in the National Theatre in London, where I worked many years ago, that now a lot of the sort of directors and it's become quite the norm that actors come to rehearsals off book, which to me again going back to what you said, Conor, seems totally counterproductive. In other words, okay, if you've got 4 or 6 weeks rehearsal and you expect actors to arrive at rehearsal off book, what are they going to do? What are you going to do? Spend 4 or 6 weeks doing?
I'm sorry for being late, guys. I backed onto my dog. And,
Oh, you run over your dog? Oh.
What?
Is the dog okay?
I take it to the vet,
Yeah.
yeah. So apologies. So
Well, we've been talking for a while, Mark,
It's okay.
and everybody, but you're most welcome, and thank you for coming along. So Mark Lambert, a very successful, well-known actor, also wears 2 hats because Mark has directed a huge amount of plays over the years. He's worked in the National Theatre here in the Abbey and a lot of theatre companies in Ireland, and also directed in the UK. We had time to speak with John and Conor to introduce, so I think it's only fair, and what we would hopefully give Mark now some time just to introduce himself and maybe talk a little bit about his process as a director. And no pressure, Mark.
Okay, so the last 2 things I've directed were on Zoom, which I found weird. I mean, the rehearsal process was exactly the same, but the actual result was obviously disappointing, and everybody's probably been involved in that or come close to it anyway. So, I've got 2 hats on, and happily so. But I specifically, there's lots of things as an actor would like to talk about what I expect from directors, but what I generally like to do is direct the way I like to be directed by as an actor. So there is a process involved which is quite traditional, but one of the things when I was asked to do this that I did think in terms of, as an actor of 42 years experience, that one of the things that I wish I'd done in my early stages of career is do more preparation, and as an actor prepare more, learn my lines slightly earlier. I'm not a great believer in coming to the first day of rehearsal with the lines learnt. I know there are directors who do that. I find the danger of that is that you get set in your way, and it's quite hard to undo the pattern of the learning. At the same time, you have to be on top of it. And certainly as I've got older, I've just done a play, Theatre Clwyd in Wales, where I was basically on stage for an hour and 40 minutes, and I did learn my lines. Then, of course, the first day rehearsal, we start rewriting. Doing a lot of that. But that's okay, that's okay. But the security blanket of that was fantastic. Generally speaking, it's a very traditional process that the first week, which I really enjoyed, is burrowing into the play and discussing it and finding out, digging deep and exploring the world of the play and the world of your characters. I expect actors to have come with something to the table. I directed a play, The Royal Lyceum, The Chaperon, and unbelievably, the first read-through, a certain Irish actor, who I won't name, was playing the chaperon. And when it came to the wake scene, he shut his script and he just sat back. And thought, oh, what's he doing? And it carried on, and it came to his line where he wakes up from the wake scene, and he said, what? And I said, you're on. He said, you're fucking joking. He hadn't read the rest of the play. He thought he died. And he hadn't read the rest of the play. It was extraordinary. He's playing the lead, and he doesn't really read the second half of the play. That's called preparation, or lack of, right? So, but I do think, I mean, it's the same, and I've done many radio plays where actors turn up and they literally take because it's radio and think, it's easy, they take the script out of the envelope. They haven't done it, they say a busket. And I think when I was younger, I certainly didn't prepare myself enough. And the result of that is, and I'm going on to, is that you don't bring enough to the fair, as it were. You don't bring enough to rehearsal. I mean, the job of an actor is, whatever about directors preparing for a play, the actors have to come to the table with something, and even on the floor, it's your job as an actor to provide the director some choices. And I have found, as a director, the actors that are pushing and exploring all the time are the most interesting, and usually in the end the most successful. The actors that sort of come with a set idea of how they're going to do it, they may have learnt their lines, who knows, but the point is that they're not really pushing and exploring. And it's so much more rewarding for a director to work with actors who are pushing and trying things out. Of course, that implies that the director is allowing the actors to do that. And I have worked as an actor with directors who do not let you do that, who say, no, this is the way we're going to do it, and I'm in charge, and that's the way it goes. But the most rewarding is when there's that collaboration and pushing of ideas. I love the story of, I think it was Nick Dunning told me the story of Ian Holm, God rest him, doing the Homecoming, where he came in one day into rehearsal, and he started speaking in a Scottish accent, which was clearly Cockney, and they had been rehearsing in his Cockney accent, and nobody said anything. And he kept doing it, and it wasn't even a good Scottish accent. They got to lunchtime, and he said to Robin Lefferre, he said, I don't think that works, does it? I don't think that works. And Robin said, no, I don't think it does. I love that story because he let him fail, and that is a huge thing. And I'm very keen on actors this goes to theatre school as well, that you have to be able to fail and not feel humiliated. So there's a strict law in my rehearsal room. Nobody puts each other down. There's another gags of, are you going to do that on the night? Are you serious? Whatever. If somebody messes up trying something out, then that is got to be allowed. It's a way of exploring. And rehearsal rooms lacking in fear are often the most productive. And it's surprising how often, I know in my past as an actor, I often tried to behave, I wanted to be liked, I wanted to be respected. So I played into my comfort zone all the time. And, as directors, you know what actors can do, but it's what you want is the actors to do more than they can do. Yeah. You want them to push their limits. And that is what is exciting for me as a director, to get actors to do more than they think they can do, to go to places they can't do. It's like I directed a play where a particular actress had to have a breakdown, and she wouldn't commit to it. And he said, well, try this, try that, try collapsing to your knees. As a director, you offer suggestions if you're any good. And she kept saying, I don't think that would work. I don't think that would work. And you go... And eventually I had to say, look, if you don't go somewhere, I said, it doesn't matter if it's awful. It doesn't matter if you think, I didn't believe myself. It was ham acting. It was no good. It doesn't matter. It's only rehearsal. And if you don't find it, I believe, in rehearsal, you will never find the truth in performance. You have to find that breakthrough moment. And then you can repeat it. Obviously every night you come off stage saying, I was there in the zone. You weren't. But the difference between, if you found the truth in a moment in rehearsal, then the difference between, I know this as an actor, you come off stage and go, I wasn't very good, but actually the difference between the night before where you were in the zone is that much, because you're representing that truth that you found. Just moving on, because I don't want to hold everything up, I think that the big thing that I was thinking yesterday when I was thinking about this is one of the things that I loathe, and you may have touched on in my absence, is that one of the cardinal sins in rehearsal is anybody throwing a mood or sulking. It sucks energy from rehearsal. It is absolutely forbidden. I'd say if there's any, I don't care if somebody throws fits or shouts at me or argues, particularly about the work, as long as it's about the work, it doesn't matter. I think rehearsals often are too calm and too nice and pleasant. I think sometimes people need, and I've heard stories of saying, so-and-so's a difficult actor. They're not a difficult actor. Particularly actresses, unfortunately, get a harder time sometimes. Oh, she's a difficult actress. I go, no, I know what you're talking about. It's just that she talks. She argues the case about artistically about the part. That's not difficult things. Difficult actors are ones that throw moods and shapes. and sit in the corner, and everybody's aware of them there, and they suck energy out. And I've had that in my time at directing, very seldom, and I've been very close to firing them. Good actors as well, because it's absolutely hopeless. Just say what you want to say, but don't throw moods. It's hopeless. And I heard you talking about lines when you came in, about learning. It is a difficult one. I accused a certain director I was working with, I called him up on bullying an actor who in tears because she had forgotten her lines, and he went at her. That is no use. That is no use. The actor doesn't think, oh, great, I've forgotten my lines. However, I've also had to play the school teacher with some really good casts, not very often, where I don't like being sort of the school teacher at all, but there's sometimes you have to pull it up, because there is no point in a director being there. If you're using rehearsal as a line learning thing, if you're allowed to forget, particularly in the early stages. But I would say in my process, if I was generalizing madly, by the second week, which is staging, which is the least interesting, some form of blocking, you can still discuss things. The third week, which is the most interesting, you're taking each scene and digging deeper. I expect actors to know the lines for each scene they come to rehearsal with. So in other words, if you're doing Act 1, Scene 1 on a Monday morning, I expect you to know the lines on those. And of course, if you drop the odd one, nobody's going to go mad. But if you are at the end of the third week, and people are saying, oh, God, what's that? As you said, I think just now, that you're holding everybody up, you're holding the other actors up, and you as a director have nothing to do. You're redundant. You might as well have the stage managers taking rehearsals.
Well, I think what you just said there, Mark, about somebody coming with a mood, I would say that, and again, I haven't seen it that often, which is not, you can see that an actor is deliberately trying to exert some kind of control, and they are using that as a kind of as a way of sort of, as you say, sucking the air out of the room, and then a confrontation maybe is the only way that's going to resolve it. In other words, you have to call a spade. You know what I mean, and say, look, this is not acceptable behaviour, and you sort of take someone aside or whatever, and and a company always know when that's happening. Where an actor like I remember years ago, no disrespect, he's a brilliant actor. I mean, he was dead a long time. With Cyril Cusack. And Cyril was incredibly autonomous in terms of the responsibility he would take. He would absolutely study everything in advance. He was incredibly, but it was all about him. He reveled in taking in times, and taking the attention, all to him. Yeah. So at some stage or another, somebody like that, they're tough bastards. They can take a bit of a kind of a challenge. And they know, because if they're behaving like that, they're putting it up to the director. It's like, they're basically saying,
tell me to shut up.
Yeah, exactly. Or you know what I mean, that they're sort of and they are disruptive, and they can have a very adverse effect on other actors. They can make other actors feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And I think calling on it is the point, and that's why it usually works. I must say, in my experience, when you call an actor and have an explosion, it solves the problem. And when you do have to act as a school teacher, comes sometimes, particularly because I appear as a soft touch, because I was an actor, there's a bit of a shock and a bit of a frisson in the room, but I think that's no harm. Yeah. I think, those sort of things, comfortable rehearsal rooms, are not always the best artistically. I mean, I'm not suggesting the opposite is true either, that you try and enforce some kind of,
reign of terror.
Exactly. It's not that either. But I do think that if people care enough about the piece, and that comes in the first week of building up in the world of the rehearsals, that people care about the play, the content of the play, and the characters, and care passionately. And I think it's good. And actors do have, of course, different paces of working. So some actors are out of the block very quickly, and as a director, sometimes it's quite hard, because those people get out of the block quite quickly, sometimes don't change the performance from then on, and it's frustrating. You come the third week and you thought, I saw this in the first week, that they're not going into another gear here. And other actors are very slow in the process. Sometimes there's lines, but not always. They're pacing it and they're not committing. and you've got to judge that. When you see an actor, not that example I gave a minute ago about this actress had to make a breakdown scene, I was really smelling that her fear. That she didn't want to commit to it because she didn't want to seem to do in rehearsal something that would seemed unbelievable and unconvincing. But you've got to find that, you've got to commit to that, and it doesn't actually matter. And I say this to students, it doesn't matter what your friends in the rehearsal room think. Who gives a shit? Like, you know, do that big breakdown that is way over the top to discover how much you have to pull back or explore. And then it only matters when you appear in front of the public. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I can't tell you, there's been so many wonderful contributions, and it's been a fabulous debate. I'm looking to Peter, and I believe we're at the point now where we need to wrap up. So, as they say, without much further ado, I will say thank you all for coming. I'd like to thank John, Conor and Mark.